Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and I love that you're here. Thank you so much for being here. I want you to get all the value you can out of the show. So in order to do that, I think you'd probably need to get subscribed to the show. You can do that on YouTube right now, and share these episodes. Leave a 5-star rating and review. Just talk about Keys to the Shop. You know, what if every coffee shop in the world knew about this podcast and could benefit from the stories of entrepreneurs, the stories of technicians and roasters, and the topics we discuss and the principles we promote? I mean, this is the point of the show, is to provide keys that unlock the potential of what coffee shops do and are capable of. And so I'm excited for that, and thank you. You're part of that. You are key to the shop. One thing that I want to let you know about is that in December, we have a webinar. The webinar is going to be about principles for cafe success, foundations that talk about people and operations and quality. It is a 1-hour presentation, and then we have 30 minutes of Q&A. It's live. Right now, we've got room for, I think, 100 people at this point, but this is our first time doing something like this. Just trying to add more value to the way that you interact with the content here at the show, and doing the webinar feels like the first step to a lot of cool stuff. So stay tuned for that. By the way, today's episode is sponsored by a couple of companies we're going to talk about later in the episode, but that's going to be Arto Brick on Instagram at Arto Brick. And then, of course, we have our friends at the Pacific Barista series, pacificfoodservice.com. But right now, we're going to get into the content of the episode, and it's one thing about this show that you know by now. We talk about leadership and management a lot, and you should know, if you're listening to this and you're a barista, go into the archives of the show and compare the number of episodes we talk to owners and leaders, about things that need to be taken on as a mantle of responsibility because of their increased authority and power to make a difference, either positively or negatively, in the business. This is something is just accepted here on the show that we have to do. It's necessary because there's a lot of responsibility when you're in a leadership position, right? That said, there is a lot of responsibility that I think also falls into the lap of somebody who takes on a mantle of authority over the work. You, as a barista, are a leader. You are a leader of yourself first. You are a leader in that you provide the work, with integrity or not, that produces an effect. It produces pleasure, happiness. It produces hospitality. The customer says, I like this cup of coffee, and I like the place where I got this coffee. I like the brand, and because of the work of the barista, whether good or bad, it will succeed or not succeed. And part of what happens is there are lots of things where you could be in a position where leadership is doing good stuff. They're doing a lot of good stuff. However, sometimes baristas don't reciprocate this. Sometimes baristas will take what is given and really not use their leadership role over themselves and the work and the responsibility they have to steward the trust that has been placed with them. In as much as, let's say, a farmer of coffee trusts people who purchase the coffee to do good with that coffee, to follow through with as much potential with the roasting, like roast it really well, brew it really well, serve it really well. That trust is a weight of responsibility. We have, all of us, that power, baristas included. Now, in the history of owners versus baristas and the pseudo class warfare stuff that's going on on the interwebs around who's taking advantage of who and blah blah blah, it hasn't really produced a whole lot of difference in the way things actually run. The way that we create difference in the coffee shop is by a spirit of mutual understanding and a pursuit of compassionate curiosity and understanding, and first starting with ourselves, owning the work we have taken on, whether you are a leader taking on leadership or you are a barista taking on responsibilities bestowed upon you. You're given the authority to serve coffee. You have authority. Just because you're not the manager doesn't mean you don't have this responsibility that transcends yourself. But if we don't accept this as individuals and then come together to help each other succeed in our very specific and needed roles within the organization, then what ends up happening is what we covered, for example, in a lot of episodes on the show already about unrealistic expectations on baristas, or, how we miss with communication and different ways that we can use our power in the wrong way. Baristas can also use their power in the wrong way, their authority, the trust extended to them. And today's episode is going to kind of take and pick up where we left off on the two-part episode with myths owners believe. There's a lot of myths that owners believe, and a huge number of them involve, how they view staff. And hopefully we have really done a good job here talking about how we can facilitate the success of being generous and kind, organized and fair, etc., with our staff. Now, let's talk about the myths that baristas believe. Now, I've been a barista for a long time in my career, and it's been a bit since I've done a full-time shift. I might get back into that stuff at some point once I don't know, I just have to get a new body to get back in that stuff. I'm 3 years from now I'll be 50. So, here we are. But a large portion of my career spent behind the bar, working tons of hours in good and bad conditions. And you look at the conditions that you work physically are not the only conditions you work in. You have a mind, you have emotions, and your mental state and your emotional state are part of the conditions you work in. And one of the things that we have to take ownership of is that part of our work. And so we're going to start off the myths with the myth of, if I feel bad, it's up to the business to change how I feel. This myth is, not necessarily always a myth. So let's just get that out of the way. If you feel bad for the reasons that bad things are happening at the business that are not in your control, okay, that is the business's job to actually fix those things. If they require you to do the kind of labor that is dangerous for your body, or there is psychological stress that is above and beyond, or even just unreasonable. We talk about boundaries a lot here at the show. So there are exceptions to all of these myths, okay? But I will say that I have seen and I have engaged in this myself, where I feel like my well-being as a human, as a person, just like Chris, is the realm of my employer. And the reason why I think this happens is because I spend so much time in that business. I work in that business. So I have 30, 40 hours a week of waking hours. It feels like my entire life. Is it? No, it's not. But we do have to work. And when we work, we give of ourselves. We give our whole self. And when our whole self doesn't feel good, then we can't track exactly how we have personally chosen or contributed to the feelings that we have and the emotions that we have. We like to make our feelings and emotions the other person's responsibility. It's up to everybody else to make me feel good. And if I don't feel good, it's their fault. And it's easy to blame the owner or the circumstances, the universe, right? It's hard to take responsibility for yourself. And at the same time, we want authority. Make no mistake about it. We want to have more control over our workplace. That is a form of authority and power and control. It is just that we don't trust other people, because what we've done is we've created in our mind this enmity between us and them, because we can't see as clearly how we have cultivated mindsets and emotions, but we can clearly see because we are observing from this vantage point, like they're out there and I see that happening to me. It's not my own voice that I'm used to. So when it comes to feeling bad, you might just feel tired. You might just feel worn out. It could be that you have something going on in your personal life that's brought itself into the business, because that happens. This is why we talk to owners and managers and leaders about gracious ways to lead, because look, life happens. Loved ones pass away. Schisms happen in relationships. Stresses of life just come with you living. And when you go into the workplace, you would hope that you have a leadership that understands. That doesn't mean that we just say, well, we don't have any operational standards here anymore. It's we work with people, right, through life as human to human to make sure that we're all kind of, responsible for still carrying on our standards, but doing so in a way that is in deference to the people that are carrying them out. But it doesn't work unless you take individual ownership of the reality that sometimes these things are not produced by the work itself. It's not produced or generated from your boss. Sometimes it's just you. And I have been that person many times for years on end. A pissy barista just got an attitude, and it's easy for me to be like confirmation bias that well, see, they're doing that thing and that thing leads to this thing, and that's why I feel this way. Well, tell me then, how is it that not everybody feels that way in that circumstance? I know there are people that were just happy as a clam. They're happy to, be in the place where I was, but I wasn't happy. So what's the difference? The thing is, you have to, and I personally think this, people can't make you feel. You choose to feel a particular way. And that doesn't mean you put up with abuse, toxicity, or anything like that. But it does mean that you include yourself as a factor in the condition of your mind and your emotions. And when you include yourself in that, now that's the first step in actually, if somebody wants to make you a leader, like in a title as a trainer or a manager, you would hope that that person has some self-awareness. Like if they feel bad, would you want them to blame the staff? Would you want them to blame the customer? If the owner feels bad, you want them to blame everybody? No. As baristas, we look to the leadership and we say, no, it's not good for them, but it's good for me. No, that's a double standard. So that's a myth. It's not always true that if you feel bad, it's up to the business to make you feel good. The business is literally just a business. We entered into an agreement. We said we're going to work here for this amount of money for this amount of time. And so far as everybody is keeping their promises, and I mean everybody, like you and them, then that's what it is. And to make it more is sometimes just not fair. And it doesn't go anywhere. And it creates a lot of bad feelings. And that's where those feelings come from. So in a pressured situation like a job, it's easy to see these things as the culprits. But in the end, sometimes it's just a matter of, what are we bringing to the table? And is it really the business that's generating these things? Or is it us? Now, we have the ability to overcome hardship, and we can decide that we're going to use these challenges as a way to grow in resilience, because then when we are given more responsibility later on, maybe you want to start your own coffee shop. Now you're going to be responsible for a whole team. And by the way, this is why so many people who were baristas and very, very vocal, and when they start opening coffee shops and they start leading people, they realize just how difficult it actually is to manage a group of people around a common task. It seems not that hard. Okay, what are we doing? Making coffee? But it's actually difficult. It's difficult because it requires a shift in the way that you as a person operate, not just a shift in tasks, administrative tasks. It's like you as a person. That's why we ask in the Founder Friday episodes, how have you changed over these years? Because it does happen, and it's necessary for the owner to grow with the business as the business grows. And so if we're always thinking, well, it's their fault, et cetera, how is that going to actually grow you if you don't think you have anything to grow in? So that's myth number one. I don't know if it's contentious or not. I've lived long enough to know that I'm more often the problem than I like to admit today, and definitely more than I would have liked to have ever admitted when I was young. Here we go. and that's myth number one. It kind of leads into myth number two, where your boss, the owner of the coffee shop, is probably exploiting you. Starting from the guilty until proven innocent is not a good look. It's not a good way to go about trying to get respect for yourself as a professional, which, by the way, I will freely give you human respect. But at the same time, your respect within context of professional work is earned. You have to do that yourself. And if you start from the get-go with your eyes kind of squinted, like, I don't know about you. It's like a boss who says to the barista, like, I think you're going to steal and give sandwiches to your friends, and I'm going to put security cameras in 100 different places in the cafe. We're just doing the same thing as a barista when you think, oh, yeah, the boss is exploiting you. You know what? Maybe some do, but most are just learning and trying to do their best. I've talked to a lot of these people, these owners, these bosses, and most of the people who claim this particular position actually don't have as much experience in talking to those folks. Or maybe there's anecdotes from a couple of different places here and there. And people will submit, well, there's this person, they did that, they did this, they held back there are bad people out there. There are lots of people I just have refused to work with here and there throughout my time in consulting, where I just felt like it sounds like you're going to be the kind of person, like, if you get a coffee shop, you're not going to respect your people. Like, you would be the exploitative owner and try to get away with as much as you possibly can to make a buck, right? Even if there are those people out there, and there are, if you start from that position, the best boss you ever had will still be your enemy. Now, why is that the first place you start? Why does that person deserve the ire of your predetermined guilty before being proved innocent position? Better to simply know, eyes wide open going in, that people are imperfect, and assume positive intention the way that you would want people to assume positive intention in you. By the way, baristas have an opportunity to exploit owners as well. You know that owners need people to work a shift. They need baristas to work the hours. What happens a lot is a barista will go in, they will say, I really want to work here. I will do this work, sign on the dotted line. I agree to all these things. And they want to be treated like you're mature and you are mentally with it. Like, you have made an educated and intentional decision as a human adult. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks into your time there, barring any crazy things that have happened in a cafe, all of a sudden you can't work the hours you said you were going to work, or you're asking off all the time, or you act like you never even saw the policies. You're not even trying to do the recipes the way that they want you to because you think you know better. Owners deal with this stuff all the time and are literally like pulling their hair out, thinking like, how do I get the staff to just do the basics of the job very, very well? And so when people are talking like owners exploiting baristas, I'm thinking, if there is anything happening, it's at least 50-50. If not more so on the other end, the barista knows they can dip out. The owner can't just dip out real quick. And that's not true for every barista. They have a lot of risk associated with this business. And you can just play around with their business. You can just kind of ignore some of these policies. And a lot of them are just really good natured and they just don't want to confront you. And they won't. They'll let you do it. And it's really frustrating them. And if you're listening to this as a barista, that should worry you a little bit. If you're not actively seeking the good of the company by following the standards and really trying to be excellent in the things that are given to you as a responsibility of that person, the trust extended to you in exchange for the pay that you agreed to, then how is it that we are all of a sudden saying the owner's exploiting you? Well, it sounds interesting when you're in the comment section online, but in reality, things are much more nuanced. So pull away from the keyboard, look at reality, and see that it goes both ways. There are people who do exploit baristas, and there are plenty of baristas who exploit the owner in their position, knowing that they got them just where they want them. So is this about seeing who can outdo the other one in terms of exploitation? No, again, back to the first myth. You just want to have some charitable assumption towards people and think, when I take this job, what am I actually doing? You are representing this company and this role, this work that represents coffee in the way that the owner of this company has set up for it to be expressed. That is a servant role. You are a server of people, a server of coffee. You are not a server of yourself. And if you can't get around that, then I don't think you should be in coffee at all. Honestly, truly, if this is just an ego trip for you, get out. It is not the kind of fruit that we want in the industry. and do some soul searching and figure out how is it that you can come to grips with the idea that your role is to make as many people around you as successful as possible. And in so doing, you will be successful. Even if you're not a leader, again, that will help you develop yourself. But if you're just thinking, I'm looking for all the different ways I'm going to be exploited, the owners are, it's like this pseudo class warfare. Yeah, this is the myth that's out there. Like the owners are making money hand over fist and they're just dripping in gold coins and all this stuff. And we are just often making more than the owners are. And it's true that a lot of owners are just not making as much as the baristas are when you count in tips and everything else. If you don't take the time to understand fully the business and the condition of the people around you, you're going to fill in the gaps with all sorts of negative caricatures about that person. And this is why we talk to owners a lot about this stuff too, is because we know that they have a target on them. And we have to make the first move in leadership to try to overcome that inertia, that resistance, that groundswell of skepticism towards leadership, born sometimes from legitimate gripes, other times born from just selfish ambition and a immature way of viewing work. So let's get rid of this myth that the owner is probably exploiting you. That is irresponsible, just as irresponsible and demeaning as the owner saying, well, this generation is all lazy and this generation is, or all baristas are just ridiculous, drama generating liabilities in the cafe. We know that that's not true, is it? 100%? Are there people that do that? Yeah, of course. And we talk to folks all the time in our coaching and consulting. There's all sorts of different things that happen behind the scenes. But healthy relationships are not born from an assumption of exploitation, right? Let's start there. So that's myth number 2. Now, this stuff is like really heavy to start out, but I like to just get out the first few that are deep and heavy topics and maybe contentious a little bit. Here's another one. The cafe is where I get to express myself. Well, yes and no. You get to express yourself within the bounds that you have said I will operate within. If there's a dress code, if there's language code, or that kind of stuff, that's what you have to do. And it never ceases to amaze me why people would complain about the thing that they agreed to do and why somehow it's untenable that they shouldn't be able to express themselves artistically or creatively or emotively at any given time throughout the day. The limitation of your freedom as an individual is a part of life. The limitation of your freedom within a society in general is part of what makes society actually work. And within a business, you can't just gripe about not having the freedom to, wear whatever patches. Some places will let you, and that's fine. That's their rules. That's their system. That's their little microcosm of an organized group of people. And that's beautiful. And we love it and we celebrate it. It's great. But what I don't celebrate and what I think is a myth is that you have somehow got the right to express yourself in whichever way you want, and that any kind of code that limits that expression is somehow an injustice. Not really the case, unless it's something that goes against a protected status and it's illegal. You know what I mean? But when it comes to like, I don't like wearing button-down shirts or something. Well, I would rather wear my favorite, tank top or something. You can't just all of a sudden create, like, maybe you're bored and you want to create some kind of a, rise up against the man moment for yourself. But that's just an immaturity that exists in a lot of different areas of life, that you have the opportunity to say, no, like they said that we have to wear these shirts, and you don't have to like wearing the shirts. But your level of maturity, I think, is determined on how well you can actually continue in the limitations given to you in an agreed upon contract to say, these are our dress codes, these are our policies. And will you then later on act as though you never read the manual and the dress code doesn't apply to you because I got to express myself. No, come on now. Really? And then you want to raise. And then we want to be a manager because we're enthusiastic, because we're passionate. Well, passion and enthusiasm doesn't make a good leader necessarily, especially if you can't follow instructions well. You can't lead people well. Lead them to what? Manage them in what? These are like the what we do is a system. It is a way that we operate in the business that is a controlled means to an end. And that end is determined by the people who own the business. We can express ourselves within those bounds. And people do. When you unite around the work and you say, our company has standards for milk temperature and texture, volumes, weights and measures, the visual stuff, like how clean things are, how we dress, the way in which we hold ourselves behind the bar. The reason why they can do that is because for that time that you're clocked in, you represent something that's other than yourself. And graciously enough, a lot of coffee shops will give you the freedom to express yourself in your unique ways within that to make it just sing, right? Like that is the unique thing about culture in these coffee shops. But it has to be focused first and based first on the work. And if everyone's not on that same page individually, like saying, I will, and I will make everyone around me successful according to this work, it doesn't produce consistency in the job. It doesn't produce a healthy work environment because everybody's got a different interpretation of what that expression looks like. And for some people, that means the product actually suffers, the service suffers. And all of a sudden, we can't have more people on the shift, even though we're busier on certain times because we're not making enough money when we do have people in here because certain standards are not being upheld. Balls are being dropped. The standards that limit us in our expression in the cafe often deliver us to more forms of freedom, or consistent forms of freedom in the ways that we're given. Flexibility with our dress code or flexibility with, the way we provide hospitality to customers. But we can't balk at these limitations and then assume that the cafe is where I get to express myself. We have to say that you are first a representative of the company and you're a representative of coffee. And by those standards, that means, look, we are limited, yeah, but there are a lot of creative ways that we can be within those standards and still be ourselves doing the common, the same work, right? So that's another myth, I think, for baristas that it would be good if we just kind of got rid of that and replaced it with a little bit more mature and nuanced perspective. Another myth here is learning about coffee and being really like I can taste coffee super well. I've got, my Q, or I've got my certifications and all these other things. I know a lot about coffee and I've studied. I've gone through Barista Hustle courses on my own dime. Like all of this stuff I've done. And I'm super brain. I got my brain filled with coffee knowledge. That should get me a raise. And maybe it would if that stuff in your cafe was like a known standard by which you could say, well, when people learn these things, we give them raises. But you got to study the rules of the business and what is valuable to the business. Do you shirk your responsibility to do dishes and clean the bathroom, yet you are very, very good at latte art? Do you seek out and consume coffee content like no other person, but somehow you constantly forget to get up on time and you're not to work on time and you're constantly asking for more grace and more grace all the time? But we start to get this idea that because we are the most passionate about coffee, that all of our little things should be forgiven. And those are actually the things that the business relies on more than you learning about processing methods and tasting terminology and in agricultural workflows and stuff, chemistry of coffee. This stuff, we've said it to owners as well, by the way. So it's not just baristas. It's oftentimes a distraction from focusing on what you're supposed to be focusing on. So just as much as a manager might say, okay, well, In order to manage my people really well, what I need to do is I need to learn more about coffee. I'm going to show them just this beautiful world of coffee. I'm going to be the gateway to this, and that passion is going to rub off on them, and they're going to be so engaged because of that passion for coffee. And that actually doesn't work, because what they want you to do is be a really good boss. Not a good coffee lecturer. And if you as a barista think that your barista competition routines and your trophies or your educational background in coffee, or what you've been educated in coffee, is or should be enough for me to get a raise in this place, then you may not have studied what it means to add value to that place. Have you asked them? I mean, maybe there is already a predetermined, like, you are here for 6 months, you get a raise, and then every year annually, if you do really great work, by the way, that's determined by what the work looks like in the SOPs and checklists. That stuff you can know. Then you get a raise, right? Sometimes they don't have a system. We certainly talk about that on the show. But you got to find out what's valuable to the business. And then when you provide that value, you have a lot more of a leg to stand on when you ask for more money, or you ask for recognition and reward of some kind, promotion to a position, because you have done what is required in that context, not what's required in your head or the community of coffee that exists outside the business that you work in. That's one of the big things that we have to pull ourselves away from in order for us to all do a good job, is figuring out how to do a good job here first in your cafe. Who cares what the best cafe you ever gone to in Amsterdam does with their pour overs? It does not matter as much as you think it does. What matters is what you're doing in your cafe right now for the customers you have access to, for the owners and the managers that are responsible to help you to do the work according to a standard that is common for everybody. And if we have not achieved excellence in those things, but we are producing for ourselves excellence in outside standards, but not inside standards, how is it that you think that that's supposed to lead to more responsibility, or more recognition, promotions, etc., and opportunities? It doesn't. And by the way, if the owner promotes you because of that, they're irresponsible. If they say, well, I can't believe, so-and-so took the Barista Hustle course, great course, there's lots of places to go for this stuff. They'll invent, like, in their mind, they'll say, well, that means they've shown initiative, so they should be the trainer. But do we know how they teach? No. Well, they should be the manager because at least they like coffee. But that doesn't mean they should be the manager. So anybody who plays that game with you and lends, like, and enables that, is, I think, also irresponsible and not thinking correctly about this. That's why we get leaders that can't lead, trainers who can't teach, and then we end up saying the boss is exploiting you, or we say the boss is bad, because they were never meant to be in that position anyway, because the reason they were put in there was the wrong reason. So you see how this is not a virtuous cycle. It's a vicious cycle, right? So don't try to promote that cycle anymore. Personally, as a barista, trying to say, well, because I went to Coffee Fest and I won the latte art competition, I can't believe my boss wouldn't give me a raise. It's a personal pursuit, and that's fine. Do it for the personal pursuit. And maybe if you don't work as a barista in the future, and you can find a context or a business in which that is a rewardable skill, the tasting stuff. You want to work for an importing company. One day that Q certification you got when you were a barista in your role was just shift lead, and what you spend your day doing is making a lot of blended beverages, doing some checklists, and doing a lot of lattes. You're thinking, oh, nobody appreciates my genius. One day they might, but you can't ruin this particular opportunity because a future opportunity that uses your skill that you developed now is not now. Does that make sense? And I've done this so many times. I mean, I used to do the competitions and I was feeling myself, it was just like, this is, I'm the hot shot here. I got the competition cred, and it's not even like I was that great at the competitions, but just doing more than other people sometimes can really be an ego boost. And that can be kind of dangerous. So I'm thinking this is a myth that you need to keep in check as a barista. And it's a pretty big one, especially in today's day and age with the availability of tons of different types of competitions. Hey everybody, it's Chris DeFirio with Keys to the Shop, of course, and we're here now to just kind of talk about our sponsors. We have Arto Brick over at Arto Brick, arto.com, but on Instagram it's at Arto Brick. Reach out to them. Reach out to Armin. He is the owner, along with his brother Vod. They are the second generation of owners. Their father Arto started this in the 70s in LA, and they've been making tiles, stone work, hard surfaces, made in LA since then. I was privileged enough. I have some video. I'm going to try to put that up of touring their facility. Let me just say it was amazing to see that go from literally rocks to amazing and beautiful tiles. And this is the kind of stuff that you want in your cafe. If you have a project where you're building out and you need stonework, tiles, and hard surfaces, check out Arto Brick. Go to at Arto Brick on Instagram and let them be a part of the team that brings your dream to life. Now, let's talk about plant-based beverages. And you can't talk about plant-based beverages without talking about the Pacific Barista series. PacificFoodService.com. Get samples, try it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it, or do and get samples. It's delicious. It's great. It stands up to the heat from steaming, produces great texture. The taste is balanced, so coffee is the star, and it's because they test the stuff with professional baristas, and the products stand up to the test. So check it out again at pacificfoodservice.com for the best plant-based beverages for your customers. Okay, now we're going to do another myth here, and that is, I don't owe anybody my emotional labor. I'm just here to make coffee. I don't have to smile at these people. What do you mean? You do. That's what hospitality is. It's a connection. You're literally wanting to be respected as a professional, yet at the same time don't want to do more work than a machine. Emotional labor is just part and parcel of working in, well, basically anywhere. Can you really take your emotions and just put them in a box outside the door and then clock in? You can't. You bring your emotions with you. And you do have to create an environment of positivity, of respect, of kindness, the things that you want for yourself. You'd like other people to help in that. You'd like to see a world where there's more respect and kindness and positivity, wouldn't you? Well, those are all things that come from emotional labor. Labor is something that you work on. Work, loosely defined in this context, is more of an intentionality where you decide, I am going to create what I want to see. I'm not going to let my emotions run away with me. I'm going to control this. Like when I'm at the register, it can be emotionally draining to be happy or joyful for the customer's benefit. And sometimes you do have to have the service voice. It is a survival tactic. Actually, not really anything wrong with it. If it's 100%, you never put in like the effort to be genuine, then that's a different thing. But nobody can be 100% emotionally connected and on at all times. It is, I think, one of the most unreasonable things to ask a barista to do is to take hundreds of people a day and just like swim in their eyes and be like, oh, tell me about your day and let's talk and let's engage with our customers like this. It's, first of all, it's weird. Second of all, it's not what the customer wants. And third of all, we physically cannot do it. But emotional labor does play a part in both how the customer perceives their service. It is part of what the expectation of being a barista is. And it is reasonable to a certain degree. And part of how we operate behind the bar is we need to communicate with one another. So when you're really kind of burned out on the register, you could go to a place where you don't have to talk to that many more people. Everybody gets to that point. I get to that point. Certain days I got there faster than others. It's reasonable, but it's not reasonable to say I'm going to be completely devoid of emotion. I'm going to be so protective of my emotions that I never extend emotional warmth or connection to anybody. If you can't do that at work with customers in a hospitality setting, which requires this reasonable emotional labor, we'll call it, then it might not be the right thing for you. There are lots of ways that you can work in coffee if you're really passionate about it. It's not customer facing. But when you face a customer, there is an interpretation that happens eye to eye. And there's a phenomenon, there's like an atmosphere, a feel between people, and it either works against the expectations they have of coffee and the coffee service, or it works with it. And so your emotional labor actually is owed to the customer to a degree. And so this isn't saying you need to end every day completely drained of all personality and, shivering in a ball in the corner because your emotions have just been sucked out of you, right? No, it's more saying that we want to avoid the idea that we are so overprotective to say that we don't have the ability to give of our emotion to people in the service encounter, in the engagement. We can extend graciousness, we can extend kindness, compassion, and charitable assumption. We can do all of those things, and it doesn't have to be a huge emotional lift the way it would be if you're listening to your friend talk about a tragedy that happened in their lives. Now, these people are sometimes talking to you about stuff, and you do have to kind of smile and tell you, like, they're talking about their divorce or talking about like all this, things that are like really heart wrenching sometimes. And I've been in my, role as a barista where I actually really knew this person really well, and they're confiding in me wasn't a burden. It was almost like a blessing. Like I was like, wow, this is truly a connection, but it's also like I really do feel for them and I want to help. And it's one of those kind of magical moments. But there are other times where in the course of the day, you really just have like one of those in your system a day or a couple of those maybe. But most of the stuff is cappuccino, latte, bagel. Oops, I forgot to say cream cheese. And how emotional is that? It's not really that emotional. And so when we say emotional labor, again, I'm not saying you need to like open up your heart to the world every time somebody wants to get like a bottled water. But I'm saying there is a level of emotional labor that comes with the service and hospitality we provide, where we have to be intentional to say, I will give these things. I will do these things in this way. The manner in which I do things, that's hospitality. But the manner in which I do things is also born from emotion that is predetermined. I have walked into work with intentionality. My goal here is I know there's going to be stressors. I know it's going to be busy, but I have determined ahead of time that here's how I will extend myself in order to address those challenges, even my own challenges. I've walked into work, and I've gone through tragic situations in my own life, loss of life and personal crisis and all this stuff. And, owners, it's great to be able to work with your baristas in these moments, by the way, to give them some time off and distance. But I also knew that I needed to work. And the way I did work, I could still know that even though I was going through this stuff, I could provide hospitality to people. And sometimes I saw it as kind of a respite from the problems that I had to try to make somebody else feel good. It really is something that maybe it's a personality thing that you have to be kind of thinking about as a part of who you are. So it's not so much of a fight, but in the most extreme circumstances, I've seen people do this well. By the way, owners, managers, all these, folks that do the schedules, when somebody is going through it, you got to use compassion. You can't just say, well, you got to be kind. You weren't smiling, when they clearly are like having an existential crisis about something that is just, wow, that's a lot. We can work with them. Now, if the labor is not able to be done, like the work can't be done, the work is suffering, the hard part about leadership, and baristas, you need to understand this. The burden of leadership is to have to make decisions for the group and for the people that come into the shop, and also care for the individual. And so that's why we have to operate with charitable assumption. And, if I'm not able to work the bar because I'm going to every 5 minutes start crying because something happened in my family, then I shouldn't be working on that shift. Now, the company might be able to extend some grace to me, even just make my paycheck the same, but there's a limit to that. And at which point and I'm speaking from personal experience, need to say, I know the company can't perpetually do this. I need to be able to find a middle ground here and still provide what is expected. And it's not exploitative. It's just, it is what it is. And if I want to, I could find beauty in it. So emotional labor is part of what we do. It's a little bit more of a nuanced thing to talk about, but I do think that it starts with us understanding a lot of what we do is relational. And if you all want to work on that, I know a lot of you are leaders, work on that with your people so that you all have an understanding ahead of time, because we know the pressure is coming. But emotional labor and extending these things out in the work is part of the work. So another one that I think we want to cover here, and this might be one of the last ones, is customers are the worst part of the job. Customer service, like dealing with the public. And it's the worst part. Okay, so is it? Sometimes, yes. Because of that emotional part. We could be very good natured and people could take advantage of that. But if we let it, it could be the best part of the job too. If we explore, if we put our mind on the scan mode, I'm scanning for positivity, I'm scanning for proof that people are great, proof that the customers are awesome, proof that today is a good day. Every day I'm scanning to figure out how can I find beauty and goodness and positivity in these things. If you're scanning for that, you'll find it more often, and you won't lump all customers into the category of idiots, morons that make my life hard. Now, listen, the customer, of course, is a necessary part of commerce. They are somebody who makes our job possible. By the way, it's not just our job in coffee possible. It is the life of the farmer possible. Even if you feel like, ugh, whatever, just like, not today, Satan, we're not going to do this. It feels like this customer is just getting under your skin because they're saying something that you think they should really know about coffee, and you've told them like for the last 3 days and they refuse to remember what a flat white is. And so we start to tell ourselves stories about how this person must be, well, they must be this or they must be that. And it just goes to show you this kind of demo of this person is always this way. And then we like to talk to our friends about it, like, this moron just did the thing that we hate them doing. So we build up a caricature of that person. It's hard for us to extend great service. 1-star Yelp reviews start to roll in, and then we're just like, we're just here to make coffee. Well, here's what we're not here to do when that happens. We're not here to, or at least you're not thinking about the farmer. You're not. We like to think about them when it comes to, offering our assent. Give some finger snaps to the post about how we need to pay more for coffee and we need to put more power in the hands of the farmer, which I agree with. However, you still have power to affect the life upstream of you. Like, this is more of a cycle. It's more of a circle. It's going to come back around. So you think that it's just innocuous what you're doing when you demonize customers because they say silly things or they don't dance to the dance we think they should dance to, and they slightly inconvenience us, times 1,000. I get it, right? But that's an opportunity for us to become resilient and actually grow a little bit. And some people just have idiosyncrasies that rub us the wrong way. Now, is that enough of a reason for us to withdraw and to put a literal bad taste in their mouth with hospitality that doesn't live up to our standard, or coffee that doesn't live up to our standard because it's just for that idiot? No, because that person still has the ability to support something that brings them joy or not. And that comes back to the person who, in all of this, didn't even really have a say. It's a little exploitative of the farmer, honestly. If you want to represent the coffee well, you got to not just think this is all about me right here in this very moment. You've got a whole host of people counting on you right now. So when you're at your weakest, which, man, have I been there. And you just, yeah, people, it's hard. It's hard. You ever wonder why technology is going the way it's going right now with self-service checkouts, with super automated espresso machines, and all the marketing that claims it's about like crafts and art and the person and people? It's actually a response to people pulling away from people. It's not an engagement tool. It's a reinforcer of disengagement. And it's because we haven't kept in our minds the idea that not only is the customer essential, but they're often not as bad as we think they are if we gave ourselves the opportunity to grow in maturity and resiliency, and even shifted the way that we pursued understanding to not just pursue our cognitive bias of, proving how customers are terrible every day. And that's easily reinforced through gossip, through observation. It just, people don't do what you want them to do. Well, that's just, why should people do what you want them to do? You think you should control people? There's a Twilight Zone about that, I think. And so when we start to act a little bit more in humility, we get to allow a little bit more of an expression of humanity in the cafes. Not putting up with crap. Okay, of course not. I've kicked my fair share of people out of coffee shops, I will tell you. Sometimes in a healthy way, and sometimes in a, let's just say I was a little upset, but it was the right move. Maybe not the best method, but made it happen. Point is, if you lump everybody into that category, just like you say, well, the boss is probably exploiting you, then how good of service are you? How good of a reputation do you think you're going to give coffee if everybody just sees your passive aggressive, disengaged, prove to me how bad you are radar scanning the room all the time? That doesn't work. This is half of the reason why coffee shops close. It's because of this stuff. So if you let a little bit of that in, it can easily take a lot from you. So customers need to be seen as something positive, and we need to pursue that, because it's too easy for us to go the opposite direction and the whole thing kind of falls down. You can see change does not only flow from aggravation. So if you want to see change, you want to see something positive happening. It's not just what makes you mad and then focus on that. It's championing a goal, championing something positive, finding something that you want to enhance and make more of in the world. It's a different mindset. And it starts with the customer. It has to. It has to, because that's the hardest part. And if you can figure that part out by starting here and then spreading it out, right? Then everything else becomes easier, right? So these are some of the myths that I think baristas believe and are subject to, because some of it's just in the air. And I hope that this was helpful. There are other myths, I'm sure, that baristas believe, such as, just talking about influencers and just how much of your career you should base on the information from people who are very popular and that kind of stuff. But right now, because how long this got, I think we'll leave it there. Now, I hope that this was helpful. And maybe it caused you to think, maybe it rubbed you the wrong way. I don't know. But here's where I am right now with this stuff. And I would invite you to send me an email, chris@keystotheshop.com, and let me know what you think. This stuff is just as good for baristas as it is for leaders and managers, by the way. We're all in this together, I think. And that spirit of mutuality to kind of come together and have the next level of imperfection, higher degrees of imperfection together for the benefit of each other, and that outward mindset. This is how we win. Baristas, managers, owners, all together. Okay. So thanks everybody. And as usual, I truly hope that this episode has given you keys to the shop.